Hey everybody, welcome inside the studio for another horror review. My name's Tyler Bell. I'm a horror author. I like talking about horror, and today we're talking about Doctor Sleep, the 2019 movie from Mike Flanagan. It is an adaptation of Stephen King's novel of the same name, which is in itself a sequel to The Shining, which needs really no introduction. Doctor Sleep follows the life and times of Danny Torrance, played by Ewan McGregor, the now adult version of the kid that famously, rode that little tricycle around the hallways of the Overlook Motel in the classic The Shining. He is a drunken reprobate in his adult years and trying to get his life back on track, which he does by moving to some place in New England and basically getting a fresh start. Once Danny moves to Massachusetts, he gets his life back on track thanks to the miraculous intervention of some guy who decides that Danny looks like he's got some potential because this guy might also have some touch of The Shining. He helps Danny get back on his feet, and Danny strikes up a psychic pen pal relationship with a young girl named Abra, as in Abracadabra, played by Kyliegh Curran. Kylie's character, Abra, is probably the first worst part of this movie. As it progresses, we find out that she is the most powerful user of The Shining on record. She can create dream spaces. She can create mental traps for wandering, roving, psychic vampire gypsies that happen to be the main antagonists of this. And yet still, her being in danger is the main plot of the film. Along with Abra, we're introduced to the True Knot, the antagonistic force of the movie, led by a ancient psychological vampire creature named Rose the Hat, played by Rebecca Ferguson. And here's where the problems with the show really begin. Most of this very, very long film, it's over 2 hours, deals with the True Knot, which is, like I said, a roving band of psychic vampire gypsies. They drive around the world in RVs, abducting children, violently murdering them, and then sucking out their soul juice, which comes out in the form of steam, which is also the physical presence of the shining power in the human body. We also find that other people possess the same thing in supposedly lesser quantities, and pain makes it taste better before it gets eaten. They figure out that Abra exists because she sees them murdering a kid, and they decide to go after her. Should be scary. Absolutely is not. This is where you get to the main problem with the film. The True Knot is not a very strong antagonistic force. As a crew of creatures, they're not really fleshed out. You have Rose the Hat, you have the tall guy, and then you have a guy named the Crow, who's kind of like Rose's second hand, and then another girl who is blonde and is the only one that's ever given any real screen time. Her recruitment to the True Knot takes up like a 15, 25-minute chunk of the movie. At least that's what it feels like. It's its own little story. She's interesting, this girl. She uses her powers to suggest to people to do things, and she uses it to punish pedophiles who try to pick her up. And she cuts little razor holes in the side of her face, but she's the most fleshed out of all of them, including Rose the Hat. Their only real motivation is to go around and eat things, which makes them about as dangerous as any animal on Earth. And in all honesty, not even that. They have some psychic powers. They can do suggestion things. They can make people go to sleep. They can do a little bit of mind control, a little bit of dream invading. But other than that, they're not really exceptionally powerful. And even at the end, when Rose is using her powers to the utmost, all it really gives her is a slight physical edge in combat against a 40-some-odd-year-old former drug addict and a child. It's highly unimpressive. The True Knot is wiped out entirely in an actual gunfight. Just guns. They pull out guns and are ambushed by two guys with guns. It's slaughtered. It's fairly embarrassing. It's a fairly embarrassing way to go. And that's kind of it for the main part of the movie. The third act is a return to the Overlook Hotel, which you can see coming a mile away. I feel like it's presented almost like it's supposed to be a twist, or like you wouldn't expect that it's going to happen, but come on. The Overlook Hotel carpet forms the intro scene, the title. The return to the Overlook Hotel is also where the movie starts breaking down almost entirely as a whole thing. Dr. Sleep has a theme and style to itself that's very much Mike Flanagan's. He's not an exceptional director. He doesn't have a lot of vision. And there's really nothing that's accomplished in the movie start to finish that you wouldn't see on any basic daytime sitcom or ABC drama. Shot reverse shot. There's some pretty decent lighting. There's a lot of really bad writing. And other than that, the movie's completely uninspired until we get to the Overlook, at which point Stanley Kubrick takes over. The return to the Overlook is quite literally a return to Kubrick's 1977 masterpiece, The Shining, one of the best movies, if not horror movies, ever made. His vision is on display start to finish, and you can see the absolute change in just directorial talent and ability and vision once you're forced to see Mike Flanagan's sort of middle management approach to filmmaking compared to an actual auteur whose stuff is jammed in between Mike Flanagan's. You would think that they would have picked a much more talented director, or at least a much more visionary director, someone like Jordan Peele, who can create extremely exceptional visuals, so that you could see an intertwining of styles. You know, hey, I see you, Stanley Kubrick, and I understand what you were trying to accomplish with this shot and set up with it. And here's how I would have done a very similar thing, so that you can kind of see him, if not having the torch passed to him, then kind of picking it up and running with it. What you get instead is Mike Flanagan doing his college boy damnedest attempts at trying to recreate some of the finest little sequences ever put on film. And it's ultimately a very sad and kind of almost cringy exercise. There's one really good scene, which is Danny Torrance confronting Jack Torrance. They couldn't get Jack Nicholson to come back, so they found a sweaty guy and had him play the part. And it's the rehash of the famous bar scene, which in the original Shining is a wonderful moment. It's when Jack is really finally starting to just give up on being a good person. He doesn't want to be, a father and a writer anymore. He wants to be a drunk. He wants to pursue his own passions of the flesh. He's sick of being a good person. That's what happens in that scene. And it's not done very, very bluntly. It's kind of just eased in the way that, you ease down a shot of whiskey. Flanagan's attempt at doing, I suppose it's a scene in the sequel. I've never finished reading Dr. Sleep. I got about 100 or so pages into it, quit, and never picked it back up again. But the scene's pretty good. It's a good emotional fodder as you ever have when you have a son confronting his drunken dad. It's probably the best scene in the movie. It doesn't last terribly, terribly long, and once it's over, the movie kind of sinks back down into dull, predictable, banal nonsense. The final confrontation between Rose the Hat and Danny Torrance is boring and predictable. It takes place on the staircase where once upon a time Shelley Duvall, frightened, swinging her baseball bat, backed away from Jack Nicholson as he, just give me the bat, just freaking out. It's a wonderful, horrifying scene. And it's honestly, the guy's just a drunk. He's just a drunk piece of shit. And he's so much more present and violent and visceral and horrifying than Rose the Hat is by a mile. I've seen Rebecca Ferguson's acting get some plaudits from people in the horror community for this role. I don't know why. She doesn't get to show off a range of emotion other than I am either being a creepy, world-wise, witch and manipulator, or I am an angry person because you took my toys. Basically, you don't get to see into the depths of this character's heart and soul. You don't get to peel back the layers of extant humanity to find a deeper truth inside of her. This is not exceptional acting. This is just acting. I'm glad that she got paid her day rate and finished the job without being injured. That's good for her, because that's about all you can really say of the role of Rose the Hat. There is nothing there. It's not an exceptionally portrayed role. It's not an exceptional villain. She's never going to be remembered by anybody. Her final confrontation isn't even the real final confrontation. That belongs to Danny and Abra and the Overlook Hotel's many ghosts who devour Rose the Hat in a scene that was telegraphed so hard I knew it was coming before maybe even the movie itself did. It's quite clear from maybe 10 minutes in how the movie is going to end. Maybe other people don't get that, but I did. After Rose is killed, Danny and Abra have a little chase through because Danny gets possessed by the soul of the Overlook Hotel, and it does some of those, I am beyond years horse shit. And then they blow up the boiler room and Danny dies in there. And that's supposed to be the end of the Overlook Hotel and Danny Torrance. And I don't know, Abra goes off to just continue being a super powered, psychological, wonderkind, rich child, down one parent, but still very much, a wealthy, upper middle class, possibly lower upper class American. The end. Let's just get into grades. For competence, I'm going to give this movie a 5. Pure middle of the road. It didn't do anything so bad in the absolute overall execution of the movie that I can say without a doubt that it was bad. But at the end of the day, it did nothing extraordinary and made so many mistakes in comparing itself to a much better work of art that you can really, really see the cracks. It's kind of almost hilariously incompetent in its absolute mediocrity, while also standing next to something of exceptional quality. People will be watching The Shining for decades, possibly centuries, because of just how well crafted it is, start to finish, and because of how interesting the pre-production and production of the story was, and because all the stories that go along with it. Like any true work of art, not only is its existence and your ability to experience the work of art great, it's got a wonderful history, a sordid past that's also quite interesting in and of itself. I find myself talking about The Shining the whole time I'm talking about Dr. Sleep, which is not indicative of a good movie. So yeah, a 5. It could have been like an 8 if they would have never brought up or tried to retread on The Shining. For entertainment value, I'll give this about a 2. The movie was boring. The movie was actually so boring. I took a break halfway through it. Me and my fiance fell asleep on the couch and decided to pick it up the next day. The pacing overall of the plot is bad. It is chunky. It's heavy with exposition and character non-moments that are supposed to be profound or insightful, but really just end up clogging an already exceedingly long runtime. This movie could have fit literally everything that it accomplished in about 60 minutes, and it's 2.5 hours long or something like that. I think it might just be 2 hours long, but it felt like about 3. It honestly felt like about 3 hours long. This is like an old Steven Spielberg length movie. But unlike one of those films where you're like, I don't feel like I've been sitting here for 3 hours, you feel every rough second of Dr. Sleep. It's not interesting. It's not groundbreaking. It's not even, functionally speaking, good. So a 2 for enjoyment. Is this film a horror movie? 0 to 5. 1. I'll give it a 1 at best. It's a horror movie only because Stanley Kubrick is in it, and so are Psychic Vampires and Stephen King. Like, if it didn't have allusions to a horror movie, and if it didn't try so hard to pretend like it was one, it could just have been a pretty decent young adult action flick. It's really a Western. Like, the movie's a Western, and I deny you proving me otherwise. It's about an older, world-weary gunslinger who takes a younger good guy under his wing, teaches that young person the ropes just in time before the roving band of outlaws arrives. They fight off the outlaws. The main character's brown sidekick dies in the shootout before the final end showdown between him and the main bad guy, who quite literally wears a black hat and is called Rose the Hat. And then he dies, and the girl is left to, well, not quite ride off into the sunset, but watch a burning horizon, the color of a sunset, for the rest of the movie. You know, it's not a shot-for-shot Western, but as far as the genres go, it is far, far, far more Western than it is a horror movie. So A1 in horror. My final grade for this film is avoid it. Avoid it. This film does not deserve your money. It does not deserve your time. If you're morbidly curious, check it out. And if you liked it and I'm completely wrong, hey, that's fine by me. But I would strongly suggest, if you have anything in common with me in your tastes in movies, find something better to watch. Honestly, go and rewatch The Shining, because that's a much more conducive use of your time rewatching something that you've already seen than spending literally half a second with Mike Flanagan's, Stephen King's Dr. Sleep. Ugh. Well, that's the review, folks. I wonder what you think. Was I wrong? Was I right? Did you love Dr. Sleep? Hey, tell me in the comments down below. Hey, Tyler, are you any good at horror? You talked a lot of shit about Mike Flanagan. Do you have chops? Yeah, you bet your fucking ass I do. Check out the Westside Fairytales. It's a dark fiction and horror podcast that I write, read, and produce all on my own. You can go and check that out and tell me how bad I am at stuff. You can also check out these other reviews. And until next time, as always, stay safe out there.